Every school kid's favourite speaker right now, the 70 watts of the W-King X10-1. Why the -1? Because they ran out of chips. They put new chips in these speakers. They're giving them a -1, so you know that they're not backwards compatible with X10, X10-1, T9, T9-1. Cannot pair them together because normally you could pair them party mode, stereo mode, but you can't do that with different models. The other thing to note with the X10 is, was a 15,000 milliamp hour battery, now it's a 13,200 milliamp hour battery at 3.7 volts. And that to you means a less battery capacity. And we're going to put it up against, oh, it's got lights, oh, it's got an auxiliary input, oh, it's the motion boom, but slightly different, well, it isn't the motion boom. We've done a Mifa Wildbox versus the Soundcore Motion Boom. There are similarities, but they're not the same speaker. They do not sound the same, except they do have great deep bass you're not going to really find on other speakers, similar size, similar price. Except, oh, but the 70 watts, everybody is saying boom, 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 it's going boom, 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 boom. Which kind of surprised me because it wasn't going boom, boom, boom. It was going slap, slap, slap when I tested it. What do I mean by that? I mean, it's a lot more upper bass. If you're going outside, you're doing it in the playground, and all your mates are thinking it's a great speaker. And to be fair, when you play it on its own, it sounds okay. But what happens when you put it up against a speaker we've already found great value, but the only problem is you only get it on eBay, AliExpress, it's not on Amazon. Checking today, about £93 or $124, about £96, $98. So around £100, $100, kind of the same ballpark. So a smaller speaker on paper, less watts. Oh, can it compete with the 70 watts on paper? But is it really 70 watts of the W-King X10-1? Let's listen at low volume. You're probably not buying these speakers to listen at low volume, because when you're in the playground with all your mates, you won't be able to hear it, will you, with all the car noise and everything else that's going on outside. But just to cover all bases, a low volume test. Now, there is a big difference in the volume steps on these speakers. So, Wildbox is going to be at 50%, W-King X10 at 35%. No, I'm not playing them at different volumes. Those are the volumes at which they are the same. A loudness.
From Paris to Berlin, in every disco I get in, my heart is pumping for love, pumping for love. 'Cause when I'm thinking of you and all the things we could do, my heart is pumping for love. You left me lonely for you. From Paris to Berlin, in every disco I get in, my heart is pumping for love, pumping for love. 'Cause when I'm thinking of you and all the things we could do, my heart is pumping for love. Patience is a game, and every night I say your name, hoping that you'll answer, 'cause I'm going insane. It's quite a long time ago, you brought me out of control, hungry for your love, and like I know what that might be. From Paris to Berlin, in every disco I get in, my heart is pumping for love, pumping for love. 'Cause when I'm thinking of you and all the things we could do, my heart is pumping for love. You left me lonely for you. You left me longing for you. You left me lonely for you. You left me longing for you. Teasing was a thing, and now I just can't let it go. Made and you were something no one else needs to know. I guess I'm thinking of you like I would know what to do if and when I found you, but I don't, I've got no clue. From Paris to Berlin, in every disco I get in, my heart is pumping for love, pumping for love. 'Cause when I'm thinking of you and all the things we could do, my heart is pumping for love. You left me lonely for you. You left me longing for you. You left me lonely for you. You left me longing for you. You left me lonely for you.
So the Mifa Wildbox has way more in terms of deep bass, while the W-King X10 is upper bass heavy. It's surprisingly big roll-off. It's only upper bass from 100 Hz and below. That X10 rolls off heavily, where the Mifa Wildbox is actually peaking. And if you compare it to the original track, you can see that means you're getting none of that bass from that original track, and the Mifa Wildbox by far the closest to the original track, and the X10 even rolling off from 3.5 kilohertz. So you're not even getting the high end. It's all about upper bass, lower mids, and some vocals. A little bit of a peak there, 2.5 kilohertz. But the Mifa Wildbox way more extended into the deep bass, far more realistic compared to the original track, and it extends further into the high end. You're playing it on its own, you're playing it outside, you're in the playground, you're in the park, you're at school. It sounds great, it makes sense. Oh, you got a great speed. Where'd you get it from? I'm going to get one. But do you know what? To me, personally, it does sound a bit of a hollow mess, while admitting, if you listen to it on its own, because they're only concentrating on certain frequencies, for most people, with their playing their party music and they're just listening for party sound and something that cuts through background noises, is doing the job in sort of an okay form factor. My problem is you can't pick it up. You have to use the handle, and I kind of think I'd rather have a physical handle if that's the case. But yeah, you're going to have to use a strap because it's a big Toblerone, whereas I can just do that with the Mifa Wildbox. But here's the thing. You've now heard them side by side. Okay, you may say, I'm never going to play it that quiet. What's the point? But the point is, when you play it that quiet, they're on different planets. It's deep bass, proper bass. And it's nicely tuned. It's kind of, it's not a million miles from the original track. And this is, we're going to give you the vocals. We're going to give you some upper bass slap. Not going to bother with the harmonics and the really high end, because you won't care about that. On the music we predict you'll be listening to. But when you hear the difference, it's stark, it's huge. But I'm not going to say it's terrible. The money you pay for a speaker that can go as loud as it says it can on paper, it's okay. But here's the thing. If you want deep bass, if you're going to do any type of serious listening, I'm not saying either of them are your best bet for a serious listen, but you certainly can do some serious listening on the Mifa Wildbox. It does, give you a good job of getting over what the original track sounded like. That doesn't do that. There's so much wrong with it. If your ears are in any way attuned, if you're just going to party out, okay, but you don't party at those volumes, well, let's try it then around 70% volume, which means in the real world, 60% on the X10-1 is 75% on the Wildbox, already getting a clue as to difference in ultimate loudness on these speakers.
The wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady. I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy. My heart feels heavy. I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I'm always self-destructive. I'll take a hit, I love it. Can you give me a second? I'm slow, got blurry vision. I'll fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady. I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy. My heart feels heavy. I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. Please help me see the things that I am. I don't understand. I'm doing the best that I can right now, but it's never enough. I'm not even ready to slow down. Just slow down. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now.
A little bit closer than it was at 40%, but still, W-King X10-1, upper bass heavy, the Mifa Wildbox taking over when it comes to the deeper bass, But overall, it's closer than it was at lower volumes. But still, we've got that big roll off 3 kilohertz and above for the X10, where we actually have a couple of peaks for the Wildbox. So the Wildbox far more extended both into the deep bass and the high end. The X10, by comparison, pretty compressed in its frequency range. It's hollow, it's compressed. It doesn't sound good to my ears, the X10-1. If you just want the upper bass, you will certainly get your upper bass. If you just want some vocals, you'll certainly get your vocals. If you want anything more, you won't be getting that from the X10-1. I'm not saying it sounds terrible, but I'm saying for anyone outside of a party type speaker that's going to be playing it indoors, that may not be your best bet for a more serious listen. Whereas you can hear the difference in the bass. There's deep extension, impressive deep extension for a speaker that size and that price on the Wildbox. And it does extend further up in the highs and into the harmonics. And it does a better job of giving you the original track. We talk about rolling off the highs. That's rolling off from 3 kilohertz. It's not even hardly past the mids. 3 kilohertz it's rolling off. And yet, it doesn't sound terrible. They obviously, clearly, quite cleverly in their opinion, tuned it for the kids in the playground who are going to be buying. And you're probably not going to, I'm not saying you're a kid looking to buy this speaker, but I'm saying probably the mass market for this speaker is the less serious listener. Someone who just wants it to go loud. It's portable, but you can't even say you could drop it in a pool. It's not even IPX7. It's IPX6 compared to the IPX67 dustproof, and you can drop it in water up to 1 meter of water for 30 minutes, and it will float. Because there's no point in doing a float test because it's not even IPX7 rated. Splashproof, yes, but be careful near a pool. So it's going to be loud, isn't it? It's going to be, yeah, I don't care about all that, mate. How's it go? That's all I want to know. So, maximum volume test.
I just wanna run away, but I don't know what else to say now. I just need to numb it up. Well, maybe I'm done, maybe I've lost. Still putting up a fight because I love my mom, I love my family. When I was young, they would all look after me. I don't know why, but I feel like a burden. I spend my life overthinking my purpose. I can't really cry, I'm so used to the hurt. Trauma keeps up at me at the wrong moment. Oh, I just wanna numb the pain for a minute. I just wanna run away on vacation. I don't know what else to say now. I just need to numb the pain. To numb the pain for a minute. I just wanna run away on vacation. I don't know what else to say now. I just need to numb the pain.
So X10, in its outdoor mode, it goes the loudest. And it's doing that by pushing especially that 2 kilohertz mark. There is a big peak where there's actually a little bit of a dip in the original track. And it's extending further into the highs than in X10-1 default mode. Still has the big roll off when it comes to deeper bass. The Mifa Wildbox still dominates in the deeper bass, just doesn't go as loud as the X10. It has a bit of a dip now, 1.5 kilohertz to around 5 kilohertz. Going to suck some of the life out of the vocals. And maybe the best listen here may be the X10-1 in default mode, where it's still very heavy in the bass. It's going to sound a little bit smoother than it would do in its outdoor mode. So there is 2 modes you will have noticed on the W-King X10-1. The indoor, the outdoor. Indoor being what I call default mode. Outdoor, it increases the bass. Does not increase the bass. Well, it increases some of the upper bass. It decreases some of the deeper bass, which is already missing, to give you a bit more in the high end. So it's a bit more screechy. That's why I didn't use it at lower volumes, and that's why we use it for the maximum volume test, because that's the one that they give you to go louder. It's the maximum volume. It is, as we always say, takes a lot more of the amp to drive the bass than the mids and the highs, and therefore all these outdoor modes, all speakers trying to go loud, 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 will drop the bass so they can push the mids and the highs a bit more, and that's what they're doing on outdoor mode compared to the indoor mode. And that's why indoor mode is, for me, the main mode, unless you really want a screech fest. It's not an absolute screech fest, but it's pretty screechy in maximum volume. But hey ho, it does what it says on paper. It goes the loudest by a couple of decibel. If that's why you're buying the speaker, to go the loudest for around £100, $100, it's doing a job, but it's not musical. It's a decent, as I said, with party music, it sounds okay. I turn it on its own, not comparing it to anything else, it sounds okay. But the minute you hear what another speaker can do, which is a bit more balanced, it's night and day, and I would not. But you know, I'm not even saying it sounds okay. If you start playing cross genres of music, different types of music, you're going to hear so much wrong with that speaker, and you can see from the tuning. It's certainly not a flat frequency response. Now, I'm not saying the Mifa Wildbox is flat, but it's flattish. It's far more neutral, and it's far more hi-fi-like, not a hi-fi speaker. But compared to the X10, it certainly is a hi-fi speaker. Even at maximum volume, I'd still rather use the indoor default mode, which is a bit smoother, than outdoor mode, which to me is the true kitchen radio mode. We mean by it's quite compressed. It's a narrow range of frequency response that your ears immediately pick up. You just hear it as something that's compressed, and you know you're missing out. At the low end and the high end, and even at maximum volume, the Mifa Wildbox has the deeper bass. So, which one are you going to buy? Remember, similarly priced, but yeah, you can get the W-King X10 on Amazon. You can't get the Mifa Wildbox on Amazon. They are both made in China. We've got 48.8. We've got 49 watt-hour battery in the X10 and 37 watt-hour battery in the Mifa Wildbox, along with a more bass-heavy sound. Probably means you're going to get less battery life. Both obviously SBC codecs, basic codecs, Bluetooth 5. They are both speakers that can be paired with another like speaker in stereo. They both have USB-C connections. They both have an auxiliary input. That's a big deal these days. They can both be used as a power bank. You can tell we're not talking about JBL speakers now. They both have a slot where you can put a flash card and play your music straight from the device itself. But only the X10 can be used for phone calls. In terms of weight though, here's the difference now. 1.5 kilos, just over 3 kilos. So 1.6 kilos, just over 3 kilos. Basically half the weight. And it's certainly not half the sound, is it? And even in terms of volume displaced, how much room it actually takes up in your luggage. 1,500 centimeters cubed, 2,200 centimeters cubed. There is a big difference in size and in weight. And the advantage for that is to the Mifa Wildbox. They both have woofers and they both have tweeters. I know there's a lot of you, I say it all the time because it's true. The minute someone talks about, and this one's got tweeters, I mean, you get so excited. It's almost embarrassing. 3 passive radiators versus 2 passive radiators. Oh, well, that must be so much bigger. No, we've said it before. We'll say it again. Passive radiators work on the air pressure of the woofers and are sized to the size of the woofers. So it doesn't matter if you have 1, 4, 8. It's surface area, total surface area that counts. Neither of these are any good for lip sync. Streaming YouTube, 185 milliseconds Wildbox, 160 milliseconds the X10. That's really poor. Neither of these Chinese speakers have an app. But you do have 2 modes on the outdoor, on the indoor-outdoor on the W-King X10 to the 1 mode. But then we do have lights that you can turn on and off. And I know a lot of you get excited about that. And I have to be honest and say, I kind of get excited when you got lights. Because it does look nice and glowy when you're playing some music. I'm trying to turn it back on. Let's turn it back on. There you go. And it can all be controlled from the speaker itself, because of course there is no app to do any of that. If you wanted to cut the bass for any reason, you do indeed have a bass off. They will tell you it's a bass up, but of course it isn't. It's a bass off when you turn it off. So I leave it on for all my testing. And that is the roundup. You wanted to know how these 2 speakers compare, and I think it's a good comparison. They are people who are looking at it, at one of them would also be looking at the other one, because we are also in the Soundcore Motion Boom range, but there are features on the Wildbox you won't get on the Motion Boom. Remember, this is a lean, clean sound, whereas the Motion Boom doesn't go quite as deep as the Mifa Wildbox, but it does sound a bit fuller. This kind of comes apart for me a little bit at the louder volumes, and so you could say switchy swappy. Lower volumes kind of prefer this over the Motion Boom, whereas I prefer the Motion Boom at the louder volumes. I'm not talking about maximum volumes, it will go a bit louder, but at say 70-80%, kind of this sounds very lean to me and the high is not quite right, whereas I prefer the Motion Boom. However, the leaner sound of the Wildbox fits as a comparison much better with the W-King X10, which is a very lean, can't say clean, very lean sounding speaker. So that was the roundup. That's a great speaker for you to play at school, in the car park, round the bike sheds. And that's the sort of speaker you can take home, and probably your mum and dad will probably like it as well. That may be a reason for you not to get it. I don't know. Neither of them are terrible buys, but they do sound very, very different. You will not get any deep bass out of the X10, none. And you may not want any. Someone like me who likes a warm sound, do want deep bass, and not too much the upper. For me, the upper bass is what smothers the rest of the track, but even if with a huge deep bass, it's nice and warm and soft and rounded, and it doesn't, for me, doesn't ruin any of the rest of the track. And so I do like a warm sound. This has the certainly warmer of the two speakers, but you can certainly get warmer sounding speakers. It's still a lean, clean sounding speaker. We've got something out of this video. See you in another video.
I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Ain't no project wife, got my logic right, cause I'm not your type. I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Sorry, ma, I ain't get it right. I'ma just live my life. I ain't about that. I ain't about that life.